Hamas had been preparing for this for at least 2 years. We know that Iran has backed Hamas financially and helped coordinate, I believe, fully these attacks on Israel. So I would imagine at the same time, years ago, they were moving people into the border. You know, this was not, oh, we're going to move people in now after the attack. It's like they've already got the structure in place. And with the amount of financing that comes from Iran and other parts of the world, that brown bagged money for terror groups, there's no doubt in my mind that they're here. Hamas and Hezbollah at our border. Hamas and Hezbollah probably have already crossed the border, probably years ago, as they were preparing for this massive attack on our great ally, Israel. What if October 7th actually happened in America? What if it's still in the making? What if there are sleeper cells preparing to target our children and our families in the United States? I believe there are. I believe there are. What if Hamas flew in and killed Americans at a music festival in San Antonio? Would we be okay with that? Would we be like, oh no, we can't retaliate because we might create more Hamas? I had to tweet back at Elon Musk on that one. I mean, I know where he's going with it, but what are we supposed to do? What is Israel supposed to do if targeted? Well, you got to fight back. You have to stand up to evil. And absolutely, should you not be made to feel guilty for doing that? Israel is not responsible for Hamas and Hezbollah. Hate is. Hate is responsible for Hamas and Hezbollah and terrorist organizations because, one, they hate and they fear Western values. And also, they're anti-Semites. They hate Jews. I'm not even going to use that word. A good friend of mine, she said, you know what? I don't even like, and she's Jewish, I don't even like the word anti-Semites anymore. Just don't even say it. Say Jew haters. Jew haters. That's what they are. They are Jew haters. But it's not just about the Jews, folks. It's about every single one of us. It's about Christians and anybody who doesn't live the life that they think you should be living. I'm telling you, this is a fact. First, they will go after the Jews, then they will go after the Christians. Did you see that guy on TV in London? Did you see him? He was the guy that was espousing Adolf Hitler, saying that we should learn from Adolf Hitler how to handle, quote unquote, these people. It's absolutely disgusting. Would that be acceptable to you, losing babies in such a horrific manner that when journalists are shown the videos that Hamas themselves filmed, they are walking out of the rooms and they are throwing up and they cannot go to sleep at night after seeing some of the videos of what these Hamas terrorists did to these children? Would you call for a ceasefire if that happened to your kids? I don't think so. You wouldn't. Here's the scary part. Hamas and Hezbollah are working right now to make that happen. Already this year, Border Patrol has caught 172 members of the terror watch list at our border. How many have gotten through? How many did get through? We don't even know. If you've been following me for a while, you will know Jennie Taer. She's amazing. She's with the Daily Caller now. She worked with me for 3 years. She used to be my assistant and even did some videos here. And she wrote stories. She broke stories on saracarter.com. That is saracarter.com, my website. And she worked with me on her nonprofit. She is now a reporter, like I said, for the Daily Caller. And I cannot wait to share our conversation with you because, my friends, pray for her and pray for everyone that has family in Israel because these are very dangerous times. But first, I want to give a special thank you to Beam. Beam, thank you so much for being a sponsor of the Sara Carter Show. And did you know, folks, that sleeping less than 6 to 7 hours per night is actually linked to reduced white blood cell count? White blood cells protect our body against illness and disease, fighting viruses, bacteria, and more. Well, guess what? Beam can can make a huge difference in your life. It can bring those blood cells right back up to where they need to be, because guess what? It helps you get some sleep. You know, we've been raving about Beam's Dream Powder, their healthy hot cocoa for sleep. And today, my listeners get a very special discount on Beam's Dream Powder, their best-selling healthy hot cocoa for sleep with no added sugar. You can't beat that. Now available in delicious seasonal flavors like cinnamon cocoa, sea salt caramel, and white chocolate peppermint. Better sleep has never tasted better. A recent clinical study revealed Dream helped 93% of users wake up feeling more refreshed, and 93% reported that Dream helped them get a more restful night's sleep. I know I can attest to that. I travel a lot. I carry my Beam Dream with me. I carry it with me. I carry my hot cocoa powder. It's with cinnamon. It is absolutely delicious. I mix it with a little bit of milk. I put it in the microwave. And right before I go to bed, no matter what hotel room I am in, I drink my Beam and I wake up the next morning feeling great. And I don't feel groggy, which is a huge, huge thing, right? Not getting up in the morning and feeling like you're still halfway asleep. Beam Dream, it does not do that. Beam Dream's powder makes you feel refreshed when you wake up. And that's something that I want to share with all of you. I want you to try Beam's best-selling Dream Powder, take advantage of their biggest sale of the year, and get up to 50% off for a limited time when you go to shopbeam.com/Sara Carter. That's SaraCarter. The discount is auto-applied at checkout. No code necessary. That's shopbeam.com/Sara Carter for up to 50% off. Jennie, I'm so happy to have you on the show. This is Jennie Taer, folks. She worked with me for 3 years. She is a truly brilliant young mind in Washington, D.C. You're an investigative immigration reporter for the Daily Caller News Foundation. You broke amazing stories with me, Jennie, as well. And, you know, I wish this was a better reunion, a better time. You and I were both just talking about, and this is just so that you all out there understand what Jennie and I have been very close. Her, like I said, she is not only wonderful, but she has been a huge advocate for Israel. She has spoken out against anti-Semitism. You did a number of stories with me on that, where you actually went to New York. You interviewed the rabbi that was the rabbi's family, the man that was beaten and attacked in New York City. You've done such incredible work. And we were just saying before we got on, you know, I'm at a loss for words. We knew anti-Semitism existed, but we didn't know it was this prevalent and this bad. I'm scared.
Yeah, it's terrifying. Like, I feel, you know, being Jewish and being immersed in this because of the news cycle, obviously, it has been so harrowing. I think that we have been so convinced that nothing like this would ever happen. But not only that, that nothing like the response that we've seen would ever happen, where you have people in American streets, in European streets, in Australian streets, calling for the death of the Jewish people, that are like excited about what happened, excited about the killing of babies and innocents, beyond even Israelis. You know, there were immigrant workers that were killed in this massacre from Thailand and from the Philippines. And these people are like dancing on their graves. And we never thought it was imaginable that people would be like that, especially in the West.
Yeah, I am stunned as well. I was so grateful to see that there was that big rally in France to support, where tens of thousands showed up to support Israel. You got to give France kudos for that. There was one in Canada as well, that this is to support the Israeli government and to support the Israeli people. But that's like one major one out of hundreds of demonstrations around the globe. And by the way, frankly, I mean, it's a mixture. It's a hodgepodge of people, but it's a lot of people that are living, a lot of Arab Americans, Arab British, or Muslim British people that are out in the streets. I couldn't believe what I saw in Great Britain when I saw hundreds of thousands of people. And there was a man that they had interviewed, Jennie, and you you talked about people dancing on the graves. This gentleman went even further. He said we should learn from Hitler, that we should be getting lessons from Hitler in how to treat, quote unquote, these people. That is what this man said on the streets of London as he was being interviewed. I feel like what we are seeing is something that is beyond comprehension. You know, never again is now really should mean never again is now. What do you think is going on here, Jennie?
I think what has happened is that we have learned that the West is just becoming a very unsafe place for Jewish people. And it's all the more reason that the Jewish people have Israel and are the people of this land that is our ancestral homeland. And I think that, you know, this was perfectly personified to me when one of my friends who's serving in the IDF as a reservist right now called me last week, and she was crying to me because she was driving alone and she didn't have anywhere to take shelter during a rocket attack. And it was right over where she was. And she was terrified. But at the end of the phone call, she was crying to me about how scared she is for me being in the United States right now. And that she feels like, wow, what it must be like to not be surrounded by Jewish people who understand what you're going through, but also to not know if the person next to you hates you and wants to kill you. And that's where we're at.
You know, when we talk about, and that's so true. And it's so tragic. But I always tell everyone, you know, I heard the ambassador from Israel to the UN. He was here in San Antonio, Texas. I know Texas is your hometown, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, and some really anti-Semitic, very dangerous incidences that happened in your own hometown. But I was at San Antonio. I went to the Support for Israel event that was happening at this church in San Antonio. And when I heard the Israeli ambassador to the UN stand up and speak, and he was very accurate. He said, look, Hamas says they come after the Saturday people first, and then after the Sunday people. So any of you out there that are supporting what you think might be some kind of pro-Palestinian movement for a two-state solution, or whatever you've got going on in your mind, because it's a lie. And we're gonna set that narrative straight with Jennie here. We're gonna set that narrative, those lies straight. Most of in fact, not one Palestinian person that I interviewed, Palestinian American, wants a two-state solution. They want Israel obliterated off the face of the earth. That is exactly what they want. But he said, first they come after the Saturday people, then they go after the Sunday people. So I get that you don't feel safe here. Guess what? I don't feel safe in my country anymore. I don't feel safe in those rallies. I don't feel safe for my children. I am actually really worried that there is going to be an attack in the United States, a terror attack that is going to take a lot of innocent human lives. And that scares me.
It's terrifying. I think that we do have active threats, and we have heard about, like you mentioned, in my hometown in Houston, they thwarted, thank God, a possible attack. It was this Pakistani man who also possessed a Palestinian passport. He was in the U.S. illegally and had all these plans to attack the Jewish community there, which of course I have family that, you know, is there, my parents and my sister and everyone there. I have like direct family. And I just remember after this attack, like, you know, it was October 7th and then October 8th. You know, I think that weekend, like I told my mom, I was saying like, maybe we shouldn't be going to synagogue. Like maybe we shouldn't be going to things. You know, I have people I speak to for just my stories that are in the government that told me that they weren't sending their kids to school that day and they're not even Jewish. And I told my mom, I don't think it's a good idea. And she was just saying like, you know, if anything, at least I'm old, like, you know, whatever, like at this point, like, what can I do? I have to practice. And that's like the choice that we've been given. I mean, the difference between now, of course, like I find this encouraging is of course we can speak openly about this, and like you can have your podcast where you speak about it. And of course we're still threatened for that, but I think it's important to acknowledge that people do have the power to speak out against this hate now, as opposed to during the Holocaust. It was like totally accepted as the norm. So people just need to use their voices and be really strong about this. And it has been very encouraging from people like you, Sarah, and from people who are not Jewish, who don't necessarily have like this personal tie, but see the connection, like you said, where it's like, it doesn't just start with the Jews. It doesn't just end there. Sorry, it doesn't end with the Jews. What starts there? So it's really important.
No, I think you're at the very, very good point. And yes, that is, to me, I mean, this is about human dignity and human rights, right? You know, this idea of these progressives with these lies, this leftist radical virus that has taken over our country, which is, it's to me, it's like completely upside down on its head. You want to talk about racist? Racist is what I've seen on the streets. And you want to talk about brainwashing? I cannot believe how many young Americans just have no concept of what life is like in the other side of the world, and how their teachers have taught them and spewed such lies like Israel genocide, and, you know, have taught them this history, which isn't even a reality. I'm going to give you this example. There was a nationwide survey. It was done in 2020, and it actually exposed what was a nationwide lack of basic Holocaust knowledge among adults under 40. It was basically including 1 over 10 respondents who never even recalled hearing the word Holocaust. They never even heard it. So it was touted as the first 50-state survey of Holocaust knowledge among millennials and Generation Z, showing that many of the respondents were unclear about the facts of the genocide. 63% of those surveyed did not know that 6 million Jews were murdered in the Holocaust, and over half of those thought the death toll was far fewer than 2 million. Over 40,000 concentration camps and ghettos were established during World War II, but guess what? Nearly half of those respondents could not name, Jenny, a single one of them. They couldn't even name Auschwitz. They couldn't name Dachau. They couldn't name whatever. They just couldn't even name one of them. So something is wrong. This is what I said on Sean's show the other night. I said, something really stinks, right? When we are supposed to be the bastion of freedom and liberty, and yet we are teaching our kids in our university systems and school systems to be Marxist radicals that, by the way, and anti-Semites who hate the state of Israel as well, and would likely march and have marched. I mean, those were high school students. The last march I was at, 100 New York high schools. They tore up American flags. They tried to take down the subway. After I left, they were threatening. One of them was using the most explicit, basically saying he was going to rape me as he was walking by me the whole time. And so there's something really wrong here.
Totally. It's completely going back to the education system, like you alluded to. It's these young people that are learning things that are completely incorrect, but then they're also not learning certain things. And to give you a great example of this is, if I hadn't been so enlightened, if I hadn't been like well educated by my Jewish community growing up, I would have come out of college thinking that Hezbollah was just like a political party, because that's what I was told in college. And you have people that don't necessarily know otherwise in those schools. And that's what we're dealing with here. And then on top of that, you have these protests happening on college campuses where Jewish students are having to barricade themselves to keep themselves safe. They have no support from their own universities. They're crying to the leadership and no one is listening.
Are you worried about that happening in DC? Like, I'm just like going through my mind, like even today with the big rally, to support Israel. Thank God this is happening. But is it going like through your mind too? As a journalist in the city, like, oh my gosh, I mean, there could be a terrorist out here targeting us because we're Jewish. Or
yeah,
we support
absolutely.
the Jewish people, because there's going to be a lot of people there that are Christian, maybe Buddhists, maybe, I don't even know, Hindus. I don't even know, people from all over that are going to support the state of Israel um, at this march today. And are you thinking like I am, like, I'm going to be there, but anything can happen?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think what happened in Israel shows that, there is cause for concern and things may not be known or may be overlooked as threats. And we know that Israel has incredible security. I feel safer there typically than here when I'm there. But, now I'm questioning the security, being Jewish, being openly Jewish, wearing my Star of David out. Like, I started wearing it during this time. But of course, I am way more alert in public transportation, walking around the city. It is very scary. I've heard about people getting attacked or harassed, and it is very scary. It is something to be very careful of. Of course, like, I'm keeping my head on a swivel, but I don't know, if there's any real threat. But of course, I am very scared because you have these people that are looking at us as less than human. They see us exactly as the Hamas terrorists saw innocent babies. Like,
Right.
they saw nothing. I mean, that's how they feel about us.
Well, no, and you're absolutely right. I was telling Cal, a friend of mine in New York, I'd gone to see them to eat, and one of their friends was over, and they were saying, and they're Jewish, and a friend of theirs got in a taxi, and that person just so happened to be, Christian, or they were Catholic, but they got in the taxi, or not a taxi, but an Uber, and the guy said immediately as they got in the Uber, "Are you Jewish?" And they said, "No, but why?" And he's like, "Well, if you were Jewish, I'd have to kill you." And they were like, let me out right now. Let me out right now. I said, well, I would have called the police. That's pretty frightening. That's pretty frightening to hear that. Wow, ExpressVPN. I have it on my computer. It's great. And it protects your security and your privacy from all of those prying eyes, including some in the FBI. Internet service providers operate like monopolies in the regions they serve. Even worse, many ISPs log on to your internet activity and sell that data onto other big tech companies and advertisers. To prevent them from seeing my internet activity, I protect my devices with ExpressVPN. That's expressvpn.com/Sarah to get an extra 3 free months. Think about that. Visit expressvpn.com/Sarah to get 3 extra months free. I recommend ExpressVPN as the best way to hide your online activity from your ISP. Just download the app, tap one button, guess what? You're protected. And ExpressVPN doesn't slow your connection. That's why ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET, Wired, TechRadar, and countless others. Visit expressvpn.com/Sarah. That's expressvpn.com/Sarah, SARA, and you'll get 3 extra months free. That's expressvpn.com/Sarah to learn more. Hey folks, if you're enjoying today's episode, please leave us a like, comment, and subscribe here on YouTube and Rumble. Also, check out the Sara Carter Show podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you. It really makes a difference. Your work is on the border. I am so proud of you. You've been out there breaking big stories on the border. And this is important because the border is what we saw in Israel, right? I was out there 2 months ago in Israel, well, now 3 months, and it was one of the best, well-maintained border security systems I'd ever seen as far as technology was concerned. I'm afraid that there was a lot of complacency in Israel, that people thought this wasn't going to happen. They didn't expect it to happen. There wasn't a lot of maybe human resources, which is human intelligence gathering. But Jennie, you know the border as well as I do now, and you're out there all the time. Are you worried? I mean, the CBP actually had a report warning field officers about the possibility of Hamas, Hezbollah, Palestinian terrorists seeking entry into the U.S. I think they already did that. Is this warning still
Yeah.
active? Do you think it's still ongoing?
Oh, absolutely. Like this came out right after the war started. And, it's just something, it's almost unbelievable because after that report came out, I had people reaching out to me from all walks of the political spectrum that were concerned about this, which is not something you typically hear when you talk about the nexus of terrorism and the border. You see in congressional hearings all the time where, the Republicans are cast as racist because they bring this up and they tie it to illegal immigration and everything like that. But to be honest, like people are starting to wake up to this, which I think is important. But in a way, it may be too late because, as you mentioned, we know that people have come across that are on the terror watch list, and we know a lot of people come across that are not detected. So who is it that came across that wasn't detected?
Right.
Did they have a terrorism history? Who knows? And that's the scary thing.
It is very scary because I think like this was my thought on it. Hamas had been preparing for this for at least 2 years. We know that Iran has backed Hamas financially and helped coordinate, I believe, fully these attacks on Israel. So I would imagine at the same time, years ago, they were moving people into the border. This was not, oh, we're going to move people in now after the attack. It's like they've already got the structure in place. And with the amount of financing that comes from Iran and other parts of the world, that brown bagged money for terror groups, there's no doubt in my mind that they're here. So have any of your sources right now confirmed the apprehension of any migrants tied to those terror groups? I mean, are you talking directly to people that are saying, yeah, look, we're actively looking at this. Yes, we have had people in custody already connected to some of these groups.
I haven't heard any of that, but to be honest, when I started probing more about this issue, I did come across something a little concerning, which is that, of course, because the United States doesn't recognize Palestine as a country, when Border Patrol is having to categorize someone's country of origin during processing, if they do apprehend them, if they're Palestinian, which I have talked to agents who have come across Palestinians, and this was at the northern border, actually, these migrants are typically categorized as Israeli because they just click the closest thing in the system. And there's not really any written rule about it or guidance. So it's kind of scary if you do have people coming across, if they are apprehended, and if the system is completely off, you don't even know how many people from that area of the world are coming. So, as you've talked about a lot, is like special interest aliens. Are they facing the same scrutiny because they're coming to the US from an area with a nexus to terrorism? Those are a lot of things we just don't know.
But one of the things I was going to talk about was the northern border, because you went up to the northern border, Jennie. And I remember that after September 11th, there was there was a terrorist that was caught up at the northern border on the West Coast, up in the upper Northwest, coming in to target LAX and Los Angeles. I mean, they pulled him over. It just was happenstance. It wasn't because they had any suspicion. And then they found out, oh, wow, this guy's got weapons in the back of his car. So that's a concern, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. You hear stories like this all the time. And it does often happen in happenstance. Like you don't see it happening where these big groups of migrants are crossing and they're caught up in those groups. It's the people that are trying to get away, that are maybe caught further north of the southern border or south of the northern border, that are coming across. And again, this is like always dismissed, is that the border does not present any terrorism risk, but it absolutely is a cause for concern.
Yeah, it's absolutely asinine. It's crazy to tell us, like we have common sense, and we, don't need the government to lie to us or to gaslight us into believing that for some reason terrorists haven't thought about the border. They're only thinking about flying in with a passport and a visa. That's just insane. I mean, of course, our adversaries and terror organizations would be looking at the border because it's the perfect system to get people in, especially sleeper cells, if they don't want to be caught. I want to go back to that story really quick, though. Were you able to ask if CBP has any plans or DHS to change the categorization system? Because if they're just marking them down as Israelis, but what if they never even crossed the line? What if they were always in Gaza, or if they were someplace else and they just refer to themselves as Palestinian? But what if they were living in Syria or Lebanon or Jordan, which has like 50% Palestinians, I think.
Sure.
Maybe more.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's like a very arbitrary system, and there just is no guidance in sight for this. Like, there's nothing that they appear to be working on. If anything, it's something that CBP seems very uncomfortable to talk about, and not wanting to really at all talk about it with me through official channels. So, as you have to go through the people in the field that are seeing this, and what they're going through and what they're hearing and what memos they're getting. And again, they're just not hearing that there's anything changing on that.
Right.
And if they do come across with, let's say, a Syrian passport or a Lebanese passport, they will likely be categorized as Syrian or Lebanese. But if they come across even with a Palestinian Authority issued passport, which do exist, they will still likely be put as Israeli.
That's just incredible to me. It's mind blowing. I have a few more questions for you. I always do. I'm excited. Do NGOs play any role in getting people from Gaza, from the West Bank to the United States, or Palestinians from any other part of the world to the U.S.? Are we seeing that as part of their migration policy?
Well, there's certainly this conversation right now that is, should the U.S. be taking in Palestinian refugees? As you know, there has been a humanitarian corridor that's been created for people to evacuate, especially to evacuate south in Gaza. The questions are, does this present a national security risk if you have all these people leaving from an area where the people there elected Hamas into power, where there have been polls taken of their beliefs on Hamas, which have shown that the majority do agree with Hamas or do support Hamas.
Right.
It is something that is very unsettling. And there are a lot of nonprofit organizations that do operate in Gaza that have a global reach. So, of course, it's something to keep tabs on. But they are certainly injecting some of the anti-Israel rhetoric into the zeitgeist here. And that's a very scary thing, because it is part of, again, those protests that are arising that are more like riots, and the social media misinformation that's being spread and all of that.
So, I'm so proud of you. You're just so amazing. You're doing such incredible work, and you really are exposing, and I think it's so necessary, like all of the national security, and that, because that's what I covered my whole career, failures that could possibly put our nation and our children and our families at risk. Jennie, what are you working on now? And I just want to hear about all the great TV stuff you're doing, and what we could do. What do you think? I mean, our listeners need to do to help support, get more young conservative, and I would say just balanced reporters out there, people that are willing to, stand up and do what's right. That's all I care about. And that's what I think you are doing. And so many others like you, like Gabe Kaminsky, and others that you work with at the Daily Caller and the Washington Examiner, of course, Gabe. But what can we do to support that? And what are you doing right now?
Yeah, I think people need to know where to inform themselves, because there's so much information out there, and where do you look? And I think, Sarah, you offer a great outlet to that. You have a website where you report on these issues. You have your social media, same with me and everything like that. And I think there's also really great places that have exposed a lot of these horrific things of what Hamas really is. And I think like the Middle East Media Research Institute does a great job of that. I think a lot of people, if you want to learn about, how disgusting of an ideology Hamas harbors, that would be the place to go, and to really understand what's going on here and what's been happening for years. And I think that be careful about what you read in legacy media. Do your due diligence on that. Understand that taking Hamas at its word is not necessarily the truth. It's often not the truth, as we've learned throughout this war. And I think, again, there are so many great reporters, like you mentioned, that do the right thing and do say the right thing that people should follow.
I want to thank Jennie again for coming on today's show. You made me teary-eyed, girl. It's very hard hearing these stories, but it's our job to tell them. Folks, make sure you are reading Jennie's stories over at the Daily Caller. She's breaking some huge ones on the border and doing incredible work to protect the national security of these United States. Anyway, she learned from the best, wink, wink, and does a great job. Please make sure you're subscribed to the Sara Carter Show here on your favorite podcast app. It really helps us. Follow me on Truth at Sara Carter Official, on X at Sara Carter DC, and on Instagram at SCarterDC. God bless you. God bless our nation. Pray for peace in the Middle East. And God bless the great state of Texas.